Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. It is November. We are kicking things off with another member of the Florida community, and I am so happy to have Eliza joining me today on the podcast. How are you doing today, Eliza?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come and talk fandoms with me today. And we've got a great selection, and something that I'm very excited to talk about is something that we don't often mention on the podcast, but it's theater.
Yeah, I've been involved in the theater community since I was a little kid. It runs in my family. We're big on showbiz, and turns out, over the past couple of years, a fandom of sorts has risen, in the theater community.
It's definitely something that seems, like you said, in the past few years has really taken off, because when my wife and I, we lived in New York City for a little bit, and we'd see the occasional show, like Broadway show, or we'd see it here in Orlando when they come through on occasion. But it seems that there's definitely been these shows where they spin out and they get this surrounding of just popularity, and people are interested in it, and it permeates more so than shows have done in the past. And it's really something to watch and just be almost like you look at it and you're like, huh, who would have thunk it? But at the same time, this is just incredible that these new fandoms, these new stories, or even old stories are popping up and just being something. Welcome to the fandom world.
Mm-hmm. As a veteran theater goer, thespian, performer, I kind of started seeing the fandoms arrive around 2013, 2014, right after Les Miserables was filmed and released in cinemas. And then especially after 2015 with Hamilton. Hamilton was definitely the turning point for young people being involved in theater and this kind of fandom coming to existence on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely something, and you mentioned Les Mis, which is the one where it's definitely, it had been around for a while. I remember one of my friends going to go see it in a theater to go see the show, and then they made the movie, and I know that the movie did, I'm not sure, I think it did relatively well, but Hamilton was definitely that thing where all of my friends were telling me, you need to really listen to this. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm listening to. I don't know. What is Hamilton? And it's definitely something now where it's you look at the show and you look at the music, and it's almost, I don't know much about theater, but it's definitely something where it feels like Hamilton broke all the rules of what a Broadway or a Broadway type show should be, and it's this whole different thing, and it drew people in that maybe had never listened to Broadway before, and has gotten them into something where it's huh, there's this whole new world of stuff out there, and it's incredible to watch.
Oh, definitely. I remember when Hamilton first came out, I was not a big fan. I was not thrilled. I was confused, kind of upset over the fact that rap and pop music were being used in theater. I was definitely more of an elitist theater fan during that time. But to be fair, the rules of theater have been broken before in the past. There was Phantom of the Opera. The big one was in the 70s with Andrew Lloyd Webber, who wrote Phantom, as well as Cats, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. He wrote the first rock musical. He was the first to take popular music of the time and use it in musical theater. So it's been done before. So now you have Hamilton kind of reusing that sort of take rap and pop music and music that people enjoy and putting it into theater and making it popular again.
What are some of your favorite shows in the theater world?
I am a huge sucker for Phantom of the Opera, which I just mentioned. It's a beautiful show. There's a reason it has been in the runs for 30 years. It's a classic. I hate to be basic, but it's a classic. I also really enjoy Evita, which is also by Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's about the First Lady of Argentina, Eva Perón, and her rise from being a poor, illegitimate child to becoming the First Lady in all her glory. And it's a great rags to riches story. Yeah.
I have to say, when I was in middle school, we took a field trip, and this was when I lived in Canada. So we took a field trip to Toronto, and one of the big high points was going to go see Phantom of the Opera, and I was hooked. I really loved the music. I liked the show. So when we lived in New York City, I took my wife to go see Phantom of the Opera, and she'd never seen it before. I have to say, she said that she didn't like it, and I was sad about that because I liked Phantom of the Opera, but I think she is more of the more modern type Broadway shows, because she went and saw Legally Blonde the musical and really liked that. But I think Phantom was too, I don't know if it was too slow or just, I'm not sure, but I liked Phantom. Phantom is definitely one of my high points of seeing stuff on Broadway, or of seeing theater in general.
Yeah, it is definitely a little bit heavy on the classical music. So if you're not big on large orchestral music, it might not be for you. So I completely understand if someone doesn't like it.
Now, when you sent over, which if long-time listeners know, I send over an email and I get information to figure out what we're going to talk about. And one of the things you mentioned was that there was a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory Broadway production, and I had never heard of that, because either I don't know, because I know that there's a book and I know that there's movies, but I had no idea that there was a Broadway production of it.
There is. It started out on West End in, I believe, 2013, 2014. West End is the British version of Broadway, put into simpler terms. And then in 2017, they adapted it to Broadway. And it was a mix of things on why most people have never heard of it. The PR was really, really shoddy. Um, there wasn't a lot of advertisement. There wasn't a lot of publicity. And also there were a ton of bad reviews. It's probably because the Broadway production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a little bit, or I should say, a lot darker than the books or movies. But I won't get into too much detail about that.
Okay. Have you seen it, just out of curiosity?
Yes, I did. I saw it 2 weeks ago. It went on tour around the United States. And the closing was in Tampa, and I was in the area, so I begged my mom to get us some tickets to go see it, and we went and saw it, and it was phenomenal. It was beautiful. Definitely some parts where I cried.
I'll have to check it out. We don't get out much for theater stuff. We're hoping at some point we get to see like some of the newer things that are out or touring. I think the last one we saw was Wicked or Lion King. I'm not sure which one, but we definitely saw one of those. And I'm like, what's coming next? Let me think. But yeah, it's always fun to go see some of the shows. If people are listening to this and they're like, oh, I'd like to check out a show, like if it's coming to the area, or if like maybe they're on a trip and they're going somewhere and there's lots of shows to choose from. Like, do you have recommendations on what shows maybe they should be looking for to have like a good entry point into like a good theater experience?
I would totally go with Wicked. It's a family-friendly show. It's become one of the major classics of theater. It's beautiful. Stephen Schwartz, who also composed the music for Prince of Egypt, Children of Eden, which is a little bit obscure, but he wrote the music for Wicked, and it's beautiful, and it's a great story. It's a great twist on The Wizard of Oz.
It is. It's definitely something like I know that people had talked about the music previously, and I'd heard some of it from different TV shows. But it's definitely I like the twist on it. The whole change of how the story is and what's going on is really cool.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely one of the first of that sort of retelling. And it's a really great show. And it's on tour all the time. It's relatively lower priced, so it's definitely a little bit more accessible than other shows.
Yeah, you're not going to have fist fights breaking out over it anymore, like trying to get Hamilton tickets. Holy cow!
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I tried to get Hamilton tickets and it didn't work out. I sat in the queue for hours and nothing happened. Oh well. Besides Broadway, and I guess it's an easy transition from Broadway over to the next topic.
Yes.
Is Disney, because they kind of lend. They definitely have elements in some of their movies, at least, of theatrical performances, and they even made their way into that realm of Broadway shows as well, which is something. But as a resident of Florida, have you always been a Disney fan, or has it been something that it's always been with you since like you were a kid? Like, did you grow up with Disney?
I'm definitely a Disney veteran, as much as I am a theater veteran. I have older siblings, and my sister loves Disney. She a kid during the 90s. She was one of those kids who grew up with all the Disney Renaissance movies. She has a story where she rented The Little Mermaid from Blockbuster and watched it so many times that the DVR cassette tape broke. So she kind of cultivated my love for Disney.
Cultivated as in, let's watch it over and over and over again.
Kind of.
Do you have, as far as being a Disney veteran, is there like a movie that you love more than most, or do you lean more to, like, say the princess type movies, or do you lean towards like other Disney movies that maybe aren't leaning in that direction?
I definitely like a mix. But I am definitely a sucker for Disney princesses.
Who's your favorite princess?
Oh no. People are gonna come out. They're gonna come after me for this. But I'm gonna say Tiana. I love jazz music. I love New Orleans. My dad raised me on New Orleans jazz. One of his favorites is Dr. John, great musician. He wrote a bunch of the music for The Princess and the Frog, and there's so much to say about The Princess and the Frog and the masterpiece that it is. It's definitely one of the underrated movies of the 2000s.
I was definitely going to say that. My wife and I saw that movie in the theater, and it's definitely a movie where it's not your typical Disney like, and I use the quotes like Disney princess type movie. It's not at all. It's something where it's flipped, like the story's flipped around. It's not like, it's not what you had with, like, say, Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin. It's definitely where Tiana has like her own agency, and she's the one that's really like driving the story versus having maybe a different character drive it. And it is a little bit darker than what some people might be used to. I remember when we watched it, we were like, wow, Dr. Facilier is really like dark, like as far as like he's got the spirits and this whole like vibe to him where you might not get that. Like you don't get it from, say, I mean, I think it's just a darker movie overall, but I feel it is definitely overlooked and underrated.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. I feel like as a kid, I really related to the ethic of Tiana because I didn't come from a lot. My parents are immigrants. We didn't have a lot. We just had each other. And yeah, it's okay to follow your dreams, but you got to put a little bit of work into it. And I think that moral of The Princess and the Frog is definitely something I was more used to as a kid, and it's true.
Absolutely. It's definitely something where I feel, and I know, right, we're talking, this episode is going to release at the start of November, and we've got Disney Plus on deck as far as streaming service goes. I know Princess and the Frog is currently on Netflix as we're recording this now, and it's definitely a movie I feel like, honest to gosh, I just want to be like, people need to watch it, because I feel like it kind of got slept on. Like it's in such a weird period of time, like with all the Pixar movies and like how Disney was animating some of their other previously like animated movies. Like it falls into such like a weird time period of it's not the Disney Renaissance time, and it's not a little bit after that period. It just feels like it falls in just like a weird spot where people like either missed it or they weren't paying attention, or for whatever reason they didn't go out and see it, and it's a shame, and people really need to watch the movie.
I 100% agree.
So besides Princess and the Frog, what other Disney stuff are you into? What gets you?
I have huge nostalgia for the classic Disney Renaissance movies, especially the later Renaissance. I love Hercules. I am actually very, very purist on Greek culture. My dad is from Greece, and our culture is definitely different from what people usually think. They usually think of, the gods, mythology. That's not us. So for a while, I was definitely not a fan of Hercules, but through the years, I think it's a good movie. It's a fun movie that was not taken as seriously and should not be taken as seriously as the rest of the 90s Disney movies.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I love about Hercules is a character that I feel gets very little respect and is definitely not highlighted as much as she should be, and that is Meg, or Megara. Like, I love her character. Whenever people bring up Hercules on the podcast, which it's not often, but there's been a few people, and that is always the main thing that everyone has brought up is Megara, as far as like a character and how everyone loves her, and that Disney drops the ball on like having like any kind of like merchandise or promotion, or having her be front and center somewhere, anywhere, for the love of everything. Like, we need more Megara in our life.
Oh yeah, I love Meg. First of all, she's a great character because she is on the villain side for some portion of the movie, and but she's hesitant. She definitely does not want to be on the wrong side of the storyline, and I don't know, she's a very well developed character, and I really like her.
Yeah, she is. She's one of those characters. I feel it's like there's a trio of women in that time period with Disney movies that don't get the respect that they deserve. One is Meg, that we've talked about. One is Esmeralda from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then one is Kida from Atlantis. Like, all three of those characters are incredibly strong, powerful women in these movies, and yet like they're almost completely ignored by Disney. And as someone who loves Disney, and I love like going to Disney when I'm able to and watching Disney stuff, it's definitely a disappointment that there's not more of their presence felt anywhere.
Oh, definitely. I love all three. I am a huge sucker for Hunchback of Notre Dame and Atlantis, The Lost Empire. And I agree. Disney definitely kind of forgot about them, which is really sad because they were the kind of characters who were empowering to little girls, who are the main demographic for Disney movies.
Definitely. And with all the remakes that are happening, it's one of the hotly talked about topics at times is like, I would love to see, and I doubt it will happen, I would love to see either a live action Atlantis movie or a Disney Plus live action Atlantis TV series, because I feel like there's just so much with how they develop that world. Like, it's almost like a steampunky kind of world where it's like, dang, I would love to see that like just play out, because those characters in that movie just are incredible. I really enjoyed them. I love and I as someone who loves like the Greek and Roman mythology, like I love Hercules. That would be really cool to see something done with that in a way. But man, I would love to see something.
Me too. I've actually discussed with multiple people about a Hercules live action remake, which I think would be wonderful. I think most ways of adapting it into live action, with like certain changes or whatever, I think whatever Disney does, it could be really, really good. I don't think there's any wrong way to make a live action remake of that movie.
Definitely. And I mean, there's already has been like a Hercules TV series before. Hercules can be done by multiple people. We can have more Hercules. So let's get on it somehow. Make it happen, Disney. Listen to my podcast. So, you know, we're talking about Hercules, and you mentioned being of Greek descent, and it feels only natural to bring up one of the fandoms, which I feel is like the biggest one, where when I saw your profile on Instagram, I was like, oh, she's into that. She likes it. And I love talking about it. And I love reading the books and just being immersed in it, which is the books of Rick Riordan, who writes like the Percy Jackson series and the Kane Chronicles and Magnus Chase and the Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo. So how did you get into the Rick Riordan books?
It's a really complicated story. So the first time I had ever heard of Percy Jackson was right around the time of the movies, which are the worst. I'm gonna come out and say it. They're terrible. But as like a 10-year-old, I liked them for some reason. I didn't read the books because I assumed they were going to keep making movie adaptations, which I had no idea were completely different and terrible in comparison to the books. And then a couple of years later, my friend, or we weren't really friends, our parents were friends. She was kind of mean to me. She was talking about Mark of Athena, and I'm like, oh, ew, classical Greek gods, ew, because I was still very much a post-Byzantine Greek purist, and she kind of made me hate the idea of Riordan's books even more. And that was until about 2015, 2016, when I saw a Tumblr post about the release of The Hidden Oracle, the first Trials of Apollo book. And I'm like, you know, I just might read these and see what it's like. So I read the series backwards, kind of. So I read the Hidden Oracle. I'm like, oh, I like this. I don't know who these people are, but okay. I like it. So I went back and I read the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. I liked it. It was great. Definitely enriching, because I was so staunch on not learning about mythology. I had no idea what anything was. I think that's a terrible idea to learn mythology from these books because not everything is accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, then I read The Heroes of Olympus and I fell in love. I love Heroes of Olympus. It definitely brought in a new dynamic with the Romans, and all that kind of stuff. I think it was also that I was around Percy's age while reading it. So I feel like the Heroes of Olympus was definitely a little bit more relatable to me in my age group than reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians when he's 12. I was reading it at 16. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. I got into the books. A friend of mine had recommended the series to me and sent the books over for me to read, and I devoured them. I think I read probably that whole first series within maybe 2 weeks, and at that time, like, the Lost Hero was just coming out. So I finished that and then went into that and then went into the waiting game of like waiting for the new books to come out. But man, and I totally agree. The Greek mythology that you're getting isn't going to be the Greek mythology that you're going to be taught in high school or in college classes about like what it is. I do think it's a good, I'd like to say, a good hook for people to get interested into mythology. And then I'd like to add that I think for my kids, they read the first book in fourth grade, and they they had to watch the movie afterwards. And my daughter came home and was like, there is so many things wrong with the movie, and she would just like list off every single thing, and I'm like, I know, that's why we're not watching the movies are terrible, please don't watch them. Like, just read the books. And I'm happy that they're, or at least I think one of my daughters into the books more than the other two. But I love the series. I love the characters. I think that the thing that I love the most is whenever you reread the series, you pick up on little things that they mention in Trials of Apollo or in Heroes of Olympus, and you're like, oh, they mentioned that back in like the first book, and now they're bringing it back, and then they're tying it to this thing, and it's like, oh, it's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, who is your favorite character in the Percy Jackson realm, or in the Riordan verse realm of characters?
So since I started reading, and getting really into it, I've always loved Will Silas. He was one of the first characters I was introduced to, since I read The Hidden Oracle before anything else, which is kind of a strange idea. But I love Will. He's sunny, charming, a great boyfriend. I think it's also that there's a lot of practicing medicine in my family. So I was like, oh yeah, medicine, doctor, that kind of thing. I don't know, he's just so likable. But these days I have fallen in love with Lavinia Asimov, from the newest book, The Tyrant's Tomb. she's fantastic, and I love her.
She was definitely, when they introduced her character, and as you kept reading through it and she kept popping up, is like, oh, this character is a complete, like, what is it, a breath of fresh air, so to speak, like, because she's does not fit the mold that you are expecting from the characters that you have come to read over these, like, number of books. Like, she is not any of the things that you're expecting.
Oh, definitely. She definitely has the personality of your typical Gen Z kid. Spontaneous, completely random, you know, that kind of character. And I'm definitely kind of random, super hyper, and I don't know, I really like Lavinia.
Yeah, it's like a combination of everything. Like, here she is, like, she's this character that's in the Roman Legion, but she's like so opposite of everything that you're expecting. Like, and of course, like, if you're coming in and having read, like, the Heroes of Olympus series, you're like, okay, you totally are down with, like, how the Roman Legion operates and some of, like, the characters and what they're doing. And then you get Lavinia, who's like shirking her duty and doing, like, things that she shouldn't be doing, and then disappearing, and just, it's like, what is this character? But at the same time, like, she's that character that just keeps popping up at the right time, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm so happy to see her.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also her dynamic, her kind of background and identity. So I mentioned that I come from a very diverse family, who is from Southern and Northern Europe. My mom is a Latvian Jew, which Latvia used to be part of the Soviet Union. So that kind of struggle to be Jewish in a secular country like Lavinia's father, um, that's something I could relate to. Also dancing. I'm a trained dancer. I thought the ditching ballet for tap was hilarious. Because honestly, I was the same for a while. I definitely preferred tap and, you know, the less traditional artsy stuff for the cool. I don't even know how to describe tap, but um, her ditching of family traditions is great, and I definitely relate to that.
Oh, totally. And it makes for a good story. And, you know, as with the Trials of Apollo, you're following, of course, Apollo, or Lester, and Meg, and the people that generally jump on the quests with him, because it's been kind of like a rotating roundtable of some of the people from the previous books. But then it was definitely nice to have, like, and I don't want to call it like a B story, but it's nice to have just a character have their own moments where it's like, wow, like, they kind of fit Lavinia in as a character where you saw her progress from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, and you had her, like, her little journey, whether she was in the book or not. Like, you got to really kind of just experience this small, I'd almost equate it to like a TV show or movie where it's like the background characters doing stuff, and then you hear about it, or you get to see some of it and be like, oh wow, like, they've had their own journey while these other characters have had theirs.
I feel like that whole story dynamic definitely made The Tyrant's Tomb one of the better books of the Trials of Apollo. I don't know. I definitely liked it a little bit more than the others.
I will say I did too. But to be fair, I love like Frank and Hazel forever. And
I adore them so much. They're definitely some of the underrated characters of the Riordan verse, which they shouldn't be. They're powerful. They are vital to the story, and people usually just kind of cast them aside, especially when talking about the Seven. They usually talk mostly about Percy and Annabeth and Piper and Jason. They kind of cast Frank and Hazel to the side, as well as Leo, kind of. Leo is pretty likable in the fan base, but Frank and Hazel are definitely cast to the side for no great reasons.
Yeah, it's something where, and I know I've talked about it previously on the podcast with a different guest, but it's definitely something where I don't understand and I don't get it because just of how the characters had been written about how powerful they were in the realm of like demigods, basically. And I grew up, and this will eventually tie back to Percy Jackson or to the Riordan books. Like I grew up reading like the Harry Potter series when it was coming out, and I was not one of the people that like screamed or cried when Sirius Black died in Order of the Phoenix. Like you read it all about like how when people get to that part, like they're upset and they throw the book and like things. Like it's a big, very emotional turn. Like they have killed off Sirius Black. I will say, when I was reading Tyrant's Tomb and Frank does what Frank does, which I'm trying not to spoil it since the book just came out recently. When Frank does what he does, I got to that point and I had to stop reading because I had to do like parenting stuff with the kids, and I couldn't read it for like a few hours. And I'm like on the edge of my seat, like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what those people who were like super upset about Sirius Black, like I'm on the edge of my seat, like what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen to Frank. I love Frank. They better not do Frank wrong. Like that was a couple hour period of like, oh gosh, like I love Frank. That's all I got to say is I love Frank.
Me too. I think his development throughout the Heroes of Olympus, especially in the Son of Neptune, that whole character arc of going from zero to hero-ish, not like Percy, but Frank definitely had an underrated character development arc in the Son of Neptune. I think it's really cool. Frank is just a cool character, and I wish more people loved him. Him and Hazel.
Me too. Those two are the best. I love them. I love them so much. I don't know why I'm whispering on a podcast. So, on top of your love for Percy Jackson and the Riordan book stuff, you cosplay as them too. I mean, I think you cosplay as, let's see here. Let me just really scroll through real quick. Yeah, you do cosplay some Percy characters, or you in the Riordan verse type of characters.
Yes, I do. Well, my most recent is Lavinia. I had to do Lavinia as soon as that book came out. Because of her dynamic, because of my cultural identity, and personality, I had to. So I already had a Camp Jupiter shirt, so I just put that on, took a Star of David that my grandma gave to me, and I got a pink wig from Spirit Halloween, styled it, cut it. It took a lot of TLC to get that wig right, and I pulled it off.
That is awesome. What drew you into cosplaying?
I've always been really into like costuming and theater. Theater brought me into cosplay because of costuming and characters. I just think playing a character is fun. Yeah.
Is there are you more geared towards like just doing like characters from the Riordan verse right now, or are you more into are you exploring like different characters? Like how do you choose the characters that you cosplay?
It really depends. Sometimes I'll see like a local production of a show and then research one of the characters that I really like and kind of create a costume around that character, or I'll read a book. It really depends. Whatever I'm focused on, I definitely try to figure out a cosplay for it.
One of the characters that you do is like one of my characters that I just really dislike, from the Heroes of Olympus series, and that's Octavian. And you do such a good job of pulling that character off. Like I look at the picture, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, Octavian.
I don't know if I should take that as a compliment,
Oh,
but thank you.
Totally is a compliment. Like,
it actually started off as a joke, because a friend of mine who cosplays Hazel, she's phenomenal. She kind of dragged me back into the Riordan verse and the Percy Jackson fandom. And we met through TikTok, which is how I got back into cosplay. And one of my first TikToks was a cosplay of Veruca Salt from the Broadway production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And that is definitely one of my most famous TikToks. It got over 38,000 views.
whoa.
A ton of likes. I kind of lost track. And so we met through that, and she's like, "Oh, you portray her so well." I'm like, "Thanks." This was definitely out of my comfort zone. I I can't pull off mean. I'm very bad at being a villain. But she dragged me back into the Riordan verse, and she's like, "Hey, you should cosplay." And I'm like, I don't know who to cosplay as. She's like, "I don't know either." And I don't know how the subject came up, but I said, "Who is the most insufferable, most terrible garbage character in any of the books?" And she immediately said Octavian. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to cosplay him. And so I did. And since this is airing in a week, I've been working on a surprise cosplay. Well, it's kind of a surprise, not really. It's more like a surprise improvement. I've been working on a kind of new and improved Octavian. In Blood of Olympus, you know, all that stuff happens. He appoints himself Pontifex Maximus. He declares and mobilizes war on Camp Half-Blood, and then he dies. And I read the descriptions that Rick gave out on everything that he was wearing and all that kind of stuff, and I sewed up and designed a bunch of stuff based on those fatal robes that got caught in the onager, which is the catapult, and then he set himself on fire and launched himself at Gaia, you know, and that is my surprise cosplay or surprise cosplay improvement. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm so looking forward to seeing that once you complete it and post pictures.
Mm-hmm. I definitely had a ton of fun doing this. I did have to throw away a bunch of ideas, which I was really disappointed about, but I like how it turned out. And I'm super excited to announce everything. And I'll be debuting Pontifex Octavian at Holiday Matsuri, which is in December. And there's a giant Riordan meetup there, and I will be attending.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. I'm hoping to attend Holiday Matsuri too. I'm waiting to find out if my schedule is going to work out to allow me to go, but I'm hopeful. I'm crossing my fingers.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, that's going to be so cool to see. Now, before we wrap things up, there's something that I'd brought up to you before we started recording, and I wanted to see, just out of curiosity, before we wrap things up, is that one of the fandoms that you used to be into for a while was the Star Trek fandom, and you had made mention that it holds a very special place in your heart. And I was just curious, like, what's the story behind that as far as Star Trek goes?
Okay, so I knew vaguely what Star Trek was. I didn't really have any appreciation for it as a kid, but my grandfather is a huge Star Trek fan, has been since he was a kid. He was he was a college kid when Star Trek, the original series, first came out, so he's been there since the beginning. And I feel that kind of family legacy and the legacy of one of the first very, very prominent fandoms is really cool. So in 2016, I met a guy who is a huge Trekker. We are still very, very close. But he was like, "Oh yeah, I like Star Trek." I'm like, my grandpa likes that show. Not sure what it's about, but he introduced me to it, and I watched the original series, and then I watched the reboots, and I fell madly in love. So I started blogging about it, and the people I interacted with on the internet regarding Star Trek were some of the nicest people I've ever come into contact with regarding fandoms. Star Trek is definitely one of the most non-toxic fandoms in existence. I think it's because it's such an old fan base, and it's such a diverse fan base, considering it opened, or the original series opened up all those doors for racial diversity, cultural diversity, one of the first interracial kisses on American television, that whole thing. I think the legacy and the standards of being a Star Trek fan are really high. But like anyone, any age, any race, any culture, would probably really, really enjoy Star Trek, and the people who are in the fan base. And I haven't been involved in a really long time, but it's definitely on my list of fandoms I want to get back into.
That's awesome. And I know as a person that loves Star Trek, you know, it's always going to be there. And hopefully it's one of the things where everyone's got their favorite series, everyone's got their favorite characters, but overall, like, it's that fandom where it is so welcoming, so very much like it's like a big family. And I know that that when you get around to it, like there's definitely a bunch of people out there, you know, ready for you to join back into the fandom.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, if there is any fan base that I could recommend that someone get into immediately or start out with, it's Star Trek. It's definitely familial.
Absolutely. Now, Eliza, we have come to the portion of the episode where we wrap things up. And if people have made it this far, thank you, everybody, for listening. But, Eliza, if people want to get more of you, what are the best places to do so on the power of the internet?
I am on TikTok and Instagram. My username is SPOOTNEEK_COS. Spootneek.cos. Yeah, it's a little interesting, but you'll find me on Instagram and TikTok through that username.
Awesome. And if you're in the area for Holiday Matsuri in Orlando in December, you'll also be there to maybe find and talk and hang out with.
Mm-hmm. I will definitely be there that Saturday.
Very cool. And I will have the links to your accounts on the show notes and on the website and on the Facebook page. So for the people listening here, if you are interested in learning more about Eliza, definitely give her a follow, check her out, and make sure that you leave some love with hearts or likes or comments or whatever people do on TikTok, because I don't know what people do on TikTok because I don't have a TikTok. I see people's TikToks on Instagram, and that's my extent of knowing what TikTok is and how it works. But I do want to thank you, Eliza, for taking the time and coming on and talking to me about your fandoms. It was definitely a good conversation, so thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on here. It's definitely a great opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.